I'll go ahead and call to order the Housing Planning and Development Committee meeting for today, January 21st, 6:01. The first order of business is the approval of the November 11th, 2024 Housing Planning and Development Committee meeting minutes. I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. And then we'll move on to the only docket item of substance today to discuss, which is Ordinance 38, 2024, which is a ordinance to enact a plan unit development, I believe, on Donald and Thoreau, near Cove Park. So at this point, I will, and I've followed this a little bit through the Planning Commission and Housing Planning, or the Architectural Board of Review. But at this point, I'll turn it over to Assistant Director Dave Boss of Planning to go over what's before us this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got, so this plan development has been through both Planning Commission and Architectural Board of Review, really starting in, I think in June was the first month that Planning Commission saw this and started the preliminary review process. As you're aware, the PDs go through a preliminary and then a final approval kind of phased before coming to council. So this PD moved through preliminary review June, July, and August, and then it came back to Planning Commission for final review in October and November. So it's been over six months of review with both Planning Commission and Architectural Board of Review before you have what you're going to see today. So I'm treating this, Mr. Chair, kind of like how we covered it in Planning Commission. I'm going to turn it over to Helene Realty and Began Design to cover kind of the plan as it is and as it was approved by Planning Commission, Architectural Board of Review, and what's before you today. And then I do have kind of the code review, zoning analysis piece. There's a lot of slides, but I'll move through them quickly just so you can see kind of the background of how the project progressed over time, and then kind of the details of the PD code versus the plan itself, and how we kind of reconcile that against this project through Planning Commission. So with that, I will ask Mr. Began to come up, and I will turn it over.
Make sure the microphone's on so folks at home catch up. There's a little button. There you go. Boom.
Ta-da. Paul Began with Began Architectural Design. I have my office practice right here in Lakewood, and also a Lakewood resident as well too. We do have representatives from the developer here as well too, if there are questions that we get to that I can't answer for you. Interesting site spanning between Donald and Thoreau. I looked at this a million times because I have 3 kids and they all played soccer, and we've been right there at that field at the grandstands looking across for a really long time. So it's neat that I got an opportunity to work on this particular site. It's a railroad site, and I know over the years there are plenty of railroad sites that were along here, and right now it is pretty much just a open green site. There are some trees on the western half of the site, and there is some slope to the site, kind of from the track side and Thoreau side down towards Donald, maybe about 4 feet of elevation change. It's not super easy to see in the pictures, but maybe you could see a little bit, and those of you who've been around the neighborhood know where this is at and can see it. I have included the pictures in here so that you can show the surrounding context and neighborhood that's there. Majority of the property on the north side is abuts property owned by Mr. Commode, who is here today. I'm sure he'll have some comments to share as well too. As Mr. Boss stated, We've been working on this project for quite some time, I think 4 times through Planning Commission and as many times through Architectural Review Board, kind of tweaking the design for this project to make it fit more within the context of the neighborhood. At the very beginning of the design process, one of the main things that I wanted to do as designer and a Lakewood resident is, I've also spent a lot of time at Cove Park playing t-ball. All of the streets from Bunce down to Donald, there's some cross streets there, right? So there's a whole neighborhood there that has east-west knot on Clifton. In order for them to get to Cove Park, they have to go down to Clifton and then back up. So one of the main design elements that we wanted to include in here is to actually have a public connection through a pathway that would take you from Donald through and line up with where the Cove Park entrance is on Thoreau Road there. So just planning wise, as we started looking at how we can lay out housing units on the site, we wanted to make sure that we include that as part of the design. Again, so that that pathway, you know, from those residents that are in that neighborhood to the west of Donald there, have an easy pathway to get to our wonderful public park there. We can go on to the next one, Dave. So here is the layout in its current form that was reviewed and approved by Planning Commission and Architectural Review Board. And we have 11 units here. There is a single family house that is facing Thoreau, and the rest are townhouse units that move back to the west along the site there. I will note and point out that we also have a very large storm sewer and sanitary main that comes and cuts through this site. It's kind of undocumented, so part of our process and proposal is to actually set up and secure an easement for the city for access to those. So that's why we don't have units to the west of the lot, and we use that for our guest parking area there. And it's a big one. I think it's like a 5-foot sanitary sewer that runs right underneath the tracks, underneath the field on the other side of the tracks, and then connects into Donald over there. We've met twice now with the city departments as well, talking through this plan. And one of the earlier iterations, we had our access driveway on the south side of the project, and the units were a little bit farther north. As we worked through with fire department and engineering, just because of where the curb cuts would be so close to the tracks, and for grading purposes, it made more sense for us to move that driveway to the north side. Additionally, it provided a further setback too from the adjacent properties on the north side. We can go on to the next one. This is just a plot plan. So these are going to be fee simple for sale units in a townhouse configuration. So this is just showing the lot lines for that. We can go on to the next one. It's hard to see, but hopefully it's a little bit better on your screens there as far as our detailed landscaping plan there. One of the things we want to do is make sure that we have native species that give us color year round, and give us some landscaping along the public walkway as a buffer between the walkway and the railroad tracks, as well as the screening on the north side adjacent to the neighbors. We are intending to have that walkway lighted with bollards along the way, so that even at night there is a clear path along that public walkway to connect over into Cove Park. We go on to the next one. These are just some 3D renderings of what the proposed units would look like. Design-wise, we kept them fairly traditional to work within the context of what the Lakewood style is as far as their turn-of-the-century homes. in keeping in line with that, and have architecture and details to work in with that. Made several iteration changes through Architectural Review Board, including making sure that our units have different siding on them so that they appear as different units, even though they are very close together. On the upper left, you can see the public walkway. It is pretty well aligned with where the Cove Park walkway comes into Thoreau, and we'd be proposing a crosswalk right at that intersection to connect into this walkway. We can go to the next one. Again, some more views so you could see a little bit more. If you were sitting in the grandstands at the field across the street at the school there, this is what you'd be looking at across the railroad tracks. And then the image down below is really more of a view from Mr. Commode's property, where he has some existing trees there along there. Our buffer includes a fence and landscaping on a 5-foot buffer on our side of that fence as well. We go to the next one. Here's our siding colors and selections. They don't show up so great on the screen, but we have our trim is actually linen. I know it looks really white there. A couple different siding colors. There's a sage color and a gray color, and two different darker ones that are board and batten for the bottom of the units. Go to the next one. Just some detailed drawings for the elevations, so you can see some of the detail that maybe doesn't come out as clear on the renderings as far as our different siding materials that we're looking at doing. Again, board and batten on the lower level of the units. Upper units will have a combination of 4-inch and 7-inch siding, some metal roofing details at the entries, and some shake style siding that goes into the gables to add that extra amount of detail. We can go on to the next one. These are the floor plans, just for curiosity. I know everybody wants to know how these things work. As we have a garage on our first floor, which is typical of kind of townhouse designs, there's not a whole lot of activity that happens on the ground floor. There's the front entry for it and a bonus room space that could be an additional bedroom or office. Second floor is the main living floor, where it's pretty much an open floor plan with a kitchen and a half bathroom. And then bedroom level is up on what would be the third floor of the unit, which is 2 more additional bedrooms and bathrooms for the unit, as well as the laundry. We are not proposing any upper level or any rooftop balconies with this, keeping again the design fairly simple so that we have gabled roofs, again tying in with the neighborhood style is. We go to the next one. This is the single-family house that is going to be on Thoreau. We wanted to work it in so it's compatible with the design of the townhomes, but as it's a different unit, wanted to give it a little bit different characteristic. Obviously, having a front porch and a front door facing Thoreau. The garage would be access off of the common shared driveway on the back, so there's not really a garage front facing. It is actually facing the side. And very typical. We can go on to the floor plans, David. First floor, again, fairly simple, open living concept with a kind of a mudroom area and half bathroom. The rest of the first floor is open living with kitchen, dining, and living. We are going to be putting a basement in this unit, so there is opportunity for additional space for a single-family home. And second floor is 3 bedrooms, 2 additional baths, and a laundry room. We can go on to the next one. That's it. There we go.
back to you, Assistant Director.
If you want, Mr. Chair, I'll go back. I'll go through our, quickly go through the.
I'd like to remind the committee and other council members and the public that kind of, and this is what I'm sure Assistant Director Boss will go through, but essentially a plan unit development creates a new zoning district that is unique to the site. We've done it, I think, a couple times in Lakewood. I think the old gas station on Lake, and then also the downtown development. So you can use mixed-use overlay, and you can use the plan unit development. So I'm sure that's what Assistant Director Boss will go through now.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So hopefully council's a little familiar with plan development, not from this, preparing for this, but also for the downtown development process. It's the same zoning code that we went through. It intends to, obviously, that the first paragraph, that allow more flexibility and creativity in design for that high-quality integrated site plan. And really, when you look at a development like this, and we'll talk through kind of the requirements for a PD, but it gets into that, it's compact development. There's pedestrian-friendly site design aspects to it, and best practices in terms of design, pocket parks, open spaces, those types of things to go through. Locations, it's the same code that we've applied. Hope you're familiar with it. Efficiencies in use of land and infrastructures, big thing. Adequate buffers and transitions, obviously maintaining and enhancing the appearance of the neighborhoods. In terms of the procedures for approval of a final PD plan, just like downtown development, we've been through the Planning Commission preliminary, we've been through the final review with both Planning Commission and Architectural Board of Review, and so we're down to council and receipt of final PD plan and that split and consolidation plat, which I'll go through. This development does not have a development agreement or any incentives tied to it. So the standards, as we go through, you're sensitive to the abutting uses and the underlying zoning district. We'll talk about that a little bit. The impacts on adjacent properties, integrated with adjacent development through street connections, sidewalks, and trails. You base, and as I'll go through this, you base a lot of the comparison for setbacks, heights, all those things off of the underlying zoning district, but one of the things about PD is it does allow that flexibility, and that's where the things come in terms of ABR and especially Planning Commission with setbacks and heights as they approve it. But the minimum requirements there, you can see that's a minimum size of 10,000 square feet for the lot, and then we get into the minimum setbacks and things as we go through. It's got to comply with EPA and all the architectural and design standards.
10,000 square feet is about 2.5 acres?
Yeah.
Roughly. How big is this site? That's my.
So this is. So I'll get into that, Mr. Chair. So
Okay.
here's the site itself. It's R2 zoning. So it is just over 30,000 square feet, 30,448 feet according to property records. So if you were to apply the R2 standards to that, that's the rough equivalent of 6 standard R2 lots. And so a density equivalency in this is, in R2, you're allowed a single-family home, you're allowed a 2-family dwelling. So in the equivalent size, if you were to apply this anywhere else in the R2 district, you would have approximately 12 units in that same density. As this site design has progressed since June, this was the site plan from June. You can see it's got, actually it's 3 single-family homes proposed and 8 townhomes, and the drive line was, that driveway was on the south side with kind of a pedestrian sidewalk on the south edge of that drive. The height of the townhomes was also at 37 feet 8 inches, which is 2 feet 8 inches above the max height requirement for R2. Again, Planning Commission has the ability to kind of grant a variance as part of the PD process, but that would be a 7% variance. That's a pretty significant variance in terms of height differential, especially when you're how our code measures roof heights for a gable. It's that median height. And so 37.88 was a pretty high height that we highlighted in that initial review. We progressed through to August, which is when they received their preliminary approval. You can see that drive has been shifted to the north side there. The units shifted a little bit further to the south, and we're now down to the current count that we finished with, that single-family home, 1 single-family home, and the 10 townhomes. The packet included the conditions of the preliminary approval that the commission provided them in August. They really wanted to focus on that northern buffer and communication and meeting with the adjacent property owners, continue to study and refine that private access drive, talking about one-way, and we continue to have discussions with the fire department on that one-way and any kind of restricted access or egress methods that could be put in place. And then they were asked to continue to study and coordinate an easement for the public sidewalk, or that trail, as it turned out. So when they came back for final plan review there in October, you can see the site plan. I believe the units have actually shifted a little bit further south, is that they're starting to play with more of the distance on the drive and the buffer on the north side. Had a meeting, as I understand, with the adjacent property owners, discussed some of those issues. And then we saw the final, what was approved by both Planning Commission and ABR in the November timeframe. The units, again, I think shifted a little bit further south, and just talking about inches and feet in there to get a little bit larger of a buffer, as I recall. On that.
Looks like the sidewalk went from 6 feet to 8 feet.
And it did. It shifted down as you're just kind of compressing the site to accommodate more of the consideration for that northern buffer there. So you can look at the parking requirements here. Our townhomes and single-family homes carry the same requirement in our parking code. Each requires a minimum of 1 space. There's no maximum. One of those spaces has to be in a garage too. So with 11 units, you got 11 spaces. There's 11 garages. There's actually 28 spaces that are proposed. So that's 11 two-car garages plus the 6 extra spaces that are over that public utility easement for the stormwater line on the west end of the lot. And look at the setbacks here. Difficult with the site to meet that rear yard setback, and that was one of the main points of contention and discussion way back in June when you had all the units kind of along the north end, was that setback was extremely minimal compared to your standard 40-foot rear yard depth on here. Your side yard depths of 5 and 15. In terms of that, they're meeting those in terms of if you were to look at Donald and Thoreau in terms of the setbacks from the adjacent properties. And then you've got the front yard setback here, which is at 18 and 10, and I'll show kind of how that compares since our front yard setback is all off of the building line map, so it depends on the street and the parcel. But you can see the setback from the front of those units to the property line here, and that trail, 13 to 23 feet. And you got a full 30 feet between the back of the units to the northern property line. Pinch point there on the west side as the lot constricts as it moves towards Donald.
And I have a question about the access drive. I see removable bollards on both sides on the site plan. Is the intention that the removable bollards stay on Donald, but they're or could you walk through kind of how that works?
So those are, I understand, we're still working through that. The emergency forces, the police and fire basically nixed the idea of a bollard. The bollard was something that came out of the Planning Commission approval as we were just playing and trying to come up with some form of control, access control to keep this as limited and restricted as possible. And so the bollards was one idea, that a car could fit through the 2 bollards, but it would generally restrict traffic down to a single lane. Fire department, not a fan of that, and so that's something that, as they continue to go through engineering and building, as we get into permitting, that'll be something that'll be worked out.
But it's intended to be, just so I can understand the site plan better, and I may be jumping ahead, and I apologize, but I think it's important. The driveway will be private for the residents or public?
It's for the residents, as I understand it.
That is correct.
Yeah. And then-
Private and one-way drive.
Okay.
Yeah.
From Thoreau to Donald? From east to west?
I think it's the other way.
From Donald to Thoreau?
Yeah.
I'd have to look at my site plan. I got
Yeah,
arrows.
actually, I think it's I think it goes Thoreau to Donald is
Okay.
what I remember.
And then secondly, the easement on the bottom, that's to the city for the sidewalk?
Yes.
And is that being built by the developer or built by the city?
It's being built by the developer.
And then dedicated to the city, or?
It's going to be very similar in terms of, that's one issue that I have to add to that plat, is the language for a public use easement for the sidewalk. That's my understanding, is that it's privately constructed, privately maintained, but it's able to be used by the public in terms of the trail.
And then the bollards will be, the lit bollards will be the responsibility of the HOA or whatever to maintain?
For the lighting, yes, that's all the maintenance of the trail and all the associated fixtures.
Okay, so, sorry for jumping ahead, I didn't mean to.
No, this is getting into you're just seeing kind of the details that we go through for planning commission in terms of comparing front yard setbacks of all the adjacent properties on Thoreau. And so they vary from 12 and a half, all the way up to 32 feet. And so the setbacks for that single family home of 10 to 18, they're a little on the short side, but they're not crazy difference in terms of the existing homes on Thoreau and the setback for those porches. The rear yards for most of all the properties in and around the area all conform to 40 feet. That is one area that the townhomes just don't meet. One thing that we did talk about in one of the meetings was the distance of the front of those townhomes from the railroad tracks. As they came up, they are not the closest property to railroad tracks, especially as you start to work your way east. We have properties that are at 35 feet, 36 feet, 28 feet away from railroad tracks. And so it's not an uncommon thing in the east side of Lakewood, especially as that tracks start to bend and you get some of those irregularly shaped lots. But that is something that we looked at. One thing to highlight, the height of the townhomes, they did bring the height of the townhomes down 2 feet. And so R2 carries a maximum height of 35 feet. And so with 35'8", this is an 8-inch variance. I think that's less than right about 2%, which our Board of Zoning Appeals would generally consider that a non-substantial variance ask. It's less than 5%. So fairly consistent with a lot of the height variances that we see. The Planning Commission did not see that as a showstopper. And the single-family home, in terms of, you can kind of see the townhome median roof height behind it, and that single-family home does fall well within the height requirements and kind of the general feel of the height of the neighborhood, if I recall. They did do a traffic impact memorandum. It's difficult. You go to a traffic engineering firm and you ask for a full-on traffic study, it's generally not warranted for anything that does not produce more than 100 trips, new trips. This being a vacant lot going to residential development. You can see that the weekday AM peak, there are 27 and 26 total new trips there for this development. And so that was something that was highlighted as being not a substantial impact, not warranting a full traffic impact study for the neighborhood. I did pull the ODOT TIMS, which is the Traffic Information Management System, reported accidents for the last 10 years. The impact of the development in terms of traffic, speed, all those were reoccurring issues or comments and discussion throughout the review period. So this was an attempt to provide some data for the Planning Commission. So in 10 years, there was about, I think, You can look at the circles there. There's about 4 reported accidents in the general vicinity of Donald and Thoreau. All of them occurred at the intersection of Cohasset and Detroit. That is the entrance to Garfield Middle School. And so that's where all the accidents occurred in the last 10 years, at least the reported accidents. The limitation, obviously, is that ODOT TIMS only has accidents that have a generated police report. So I readily admit there's close calls. There could be other things that happen and people don't report. They don't want it to go on their insurance or whatever. But I also did take traffic data on Thoreau, and that was for the week of 10/28 through 11/3. That includes both the weekend and a school week. And so you can see the average daily traffic, average speed. 85th percentile speed is something that traffic engineers and the police department uses to evaluate the effectiveness of a speed limit. And then our standard city metric for excessive speeding, that percentage of total volume that exceeds 35 miles an hour. You can see that compared to the average for all, I think it was about 55 streets that we've studied in the past 4 years in the neighborhood traffic calming program. So their average traffic on Thoreau for that day, the average daily traffic is at 516. It's a little over half of the average for all Lakewood streets that we've studied. Their average speed was below 20, and their 85th percentile was below the posted limit. And then you can see the percentage of volume over 35 miles an hour, which is 0.33%. So just, it was a point of data, objective data, to compare it against all the other streets that we have studied in the past 4 years that we've received complaints or nominations from across the entire city. How Thoreau would fall out there, being the street, I think, as I recall, that as part of the design and the discussion, that would be the entry point of traffic. Subdivision plat for this includes both the utility easement as well as the trail and the public use. That's where I just need to take the language that we worked out for the downtown development, and I will propose that to the developer to add into this for that trail. Although they do highlight, this would be the trail easement from page 3 of the plat. And then that utility easement on the bottom to cover that storm sanitary line. We talked about the vision in terms of how this reconciles against the vision, since that's one of the things in the PD code. And I will just, we focused on, I think at the end of the day, creating places for people, that third bullet down, as that specifically applies to housing. This is arguably one development that adds to the diversity of housing stock in Lakewood. It is new infill development in terms of the scale and character of the surrounding residential uses. That was part of the Planning Commission and Architectural Board of Review that was considered. And then I believe in terms of the townhome product that we don't have a whole lot in Lakewood. That our intention, or at least the intention of the developer, the Planning Commission and ABR supported, is that they believe it supports and creates affordable housing in terms of that diversity of housing types that kind of generally sit between rental apartments and single-family homes. And then for reference, for council's reference, I did this for Planning Commission based on the amount of public comment that we received in June, August, October, November. I kept kind of a running log of all of the commentary and the issues that came up throughout that, especially during the final review process. And so there's a slide from October and then a slide from November. So that is what I have. Pending any questions, we can go into greater detail, Mr. Chair, but that's kind of the general code considerations, the zoning considerations, and then the proposals for this PD plan that's before you.
Thank you. Appreciate the overview, and I do know, I'm sure I'll have questions, but I think other folks on the committee and then council may have questions as well. It is interesting looking at the Google Street View of Donald. There's a worn path to the railroad corridor from the end of the sidewalk. The question I have, though, before I go to other folks is, it says sidewalk later to be built on Donald. What's the idea there? Is that the city's expense, and then the city's going to intend to dovetail it with the end of the project?
Are you talking about on the west end there?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I think was proposed. It's not supported at this time by Public Works. I think it's just going to connect, the intention is to connect that path to the existing sidewalk on the east side of Donald. Is where, as they're working out the civil plans and the extent of those, that trail, it will connect to the sidewalk. That, I just don't believe Public Works is in a position right now to continue that sidewalk across at the base of Donald.
Is it the hydrant, or what's the consideration?
I defer to Public Works as they continue to work through this.
Okay. I just, folks that live on Merle, and in that whole neighborhood that Mr. Egan discussed, this is, I think they've been using it as an access point to get over to Cove Park.
Mm-hmm.
But any other questions from the committee? I know Mr. Bullock has some questions.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I also know this is Ward 4, and I know Councilwoman Marks is of course here and may have some thoughts. I see some of the residents here. So I've got a couple, and Mr. Began, thank you for being here. Developers, thanks for being here. There's a lot of work that's gone into this and thoughtful presentation. It's City Council's first chance to dig in depth in this setting. So appreciate all of this. I've got some just rapid fire factual questions I'd like to start with, and then maybe get into more of the evaluation, and I'll try to talk quickly. So the land was owned previously by whom? A private owner or the railroad?
The railroad.
Okay, and now that the transfer's occurred or is pending? Who owns it today, I guess?
It's pending, yeah.
Okay. It's, and under the underlying zoning used by right, it's one single or double property at the dimensions that we have. If you split it in two, you'd be talking two single or double properties. I caught from Mr. Boss's presentation some kind of ratio of, if you average out this extra large parcel to an average, nearby parcel that'd be higher than that. But what we're talking about with 11 proposed homes is quite a significant higher density compared to what the underlying zoning allows. This is, I know you're trying to accomplish a lot and it's thoughtful. So I respect that. And I also think that the impacts on the neighborhood, the character, and the neighbors are also to be balanced. And I see that you've done that throughout. Do you know what's the square footage, if you said that I missed it? And then can you share the price point approximately of the units? Mostly just curious.
Square footages are on the floor plans if you wanted to go. I don't remember that off the top of my head. I apologize for that. Price points are still to be determined, because right now we are working through construction detailing and costing to get our detailed estimates. As you see with this property, yes, there's 11 units. There's a lot of concrete, right? We had to increase the width of our driveway to accommodate the fire department to 20 feet. They wanted to go all the way through the site. And then obviously we requested to increase the width of our sidewalk as well. So there's a lot of infrastructure costs into this. And so once we get a handle on all of that, we actually just got some news that there is some unsuitable soils that we're gonna have to take out and remediate. So I think once we get through that exercise, we'll be at a better point to know what the costs are gonna be. But if I recall correctly, I mean, they're a little under 2,000 square feet for the units.
Okay, thanks. And for those of us who are, we're not planning development professionals, adding a lot of concrete adds costs. Is that what you're driving at?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
I think I see staggering, I don't have the right term, of the elevation on the front in the south, but not on the rear and the north side. Is that right? And if it is,
that is correct.
could we add some staggering? What is the term I'm looking for, design professionals, to create some visual interest and beauty?
We looked at doing all kinds of different things, Councilman Bullock, for this one. As our landscape buffer increased, as we needed to increase the width of our driveway, as we needed to increase the width of the sidewalk there, we're really, where we can build, and actually on this, is very minimal. So on the left side, you know, we have, I think, a little 4 feet landscape buffer between the house and the sidewalk. We have like 12 feet on the other ones, so that we can have a little bit of a semblance of a front yard. In order to do any additional pushing and pulling to create some relief, staggering on the back side of this, something would have to give, right? So either the units would have to get smaller in order to do that, or yards would have to get smaller, because they're really, you know, again, with our landscape buffer, our driveway, our sidewalk, we're kind of limited on where we can push and pull those particular units. We do have on the rear elevations, and I don't know if you guys want to go to those, right? We do have different siding on the back of it, so that there is some variation on the back. This is one of the points that we talked through quite a bit with Architectural Review Board. Had similar concerns. How do we make the back of this so it's not a necessarily a flat wall? So having differentiation and different siding types on there. We do have the porch on the back of it to break up that elevation.
Thank you. I understand what you're saying, and even if it wasn't, if you weren't shifting the units physically forward and back, maybe there's some cosmetic feature. In the same vein, you know, the quality of the materials, we're always looking for the highest quality materials. The colors read gray in the renderings. Are they a little, I think the sage, it said, is that a gray or is that a slightly green?
It's more of a green color. I mean, they are neutral. I mean, we're not going, you know, bright colors with this. But yes, there is some coloration to them. It is not all gray. And again, renderings don't quite show exactly what we're planning or intended. We did have samples that we did bring to Architectural Review Board. Happy to share those.
And you know, I know you're working out your price points. I know you're proposing vinyl. Is there? I think there's a tier that was used in the McKinley Place development that's higher quality than vinyl. Is that an option?
We are using a higher quality vinyl, and again, part of the reason with going with the board and batten look at the bottom is to have some of that differentiation. Same thing with the shake siding that's up in the gables. We are adding some metal roofing components on the front to, again, give a little bit variation in the texture on the units. You know, as far as going to a different material other than that, we had looked at it. Again, the way that this development is kind of going, I think we're doing an appropriate material that I think is going to look good and fit in with the character of the neighborhood.
Okay, thanks. Just 2 more here. Light pollution, I imagine you've addressed that, but I don't know if I heard it addressed here. Have you done a light study so that the spillover is within our standards and codes?
Yeah, the lighting that we do have, we have lighting at the back door, lighting at the front door as well. We don't have any street lighting, so that driveway along the back, there's no poles, nothing like that. And really the only lighting that's real site lighting per se is the bollard lighting that we're providing along the walkway.
Okay, and so if that's screened, and the lumen level is appropriate, we expect to be successful?
Yes, I mean, it's going to be very similar, you know, without pulling out the lighting study and the lumens, if your neighbor turned on his back porch light, so.
Okay, and then my last question for the city, the pedestrian connection to Cove Park ought to be successful. So, you know, in the conversation with the neighborhood, the discussion is, all right, there's a lot of density, potential traffic, the changing character, certainly the views from Mr. Kermode's backyard, which is a nice kind of green area, which is scarce to come by in our town. The upside would be the pedestrian walkway and the connection to the neighborhood surrounding it. Now, the developer is agreeing to whatever they're agreeing to on the potential, on the pending property. But then the value of that segment is enhanced if the connection across the roads tying into Thoreau and Donald, and especially Cove Park, are thoughtful, quality, safe, and successful, and that's on the city's dime. I, for one, would strongly advocate that the city make whatever investments would be needed to make sure those are well thought out and beautiful. I know Councilman Baker just talked about some of that on the one side. The other end, if I heard correctly, would be where we tie into the Cove Park entrance. I've heard a little bit about maybe utility pole is awkwardly placed because maybe it was there before anybody thought of having a pedestrian connection. If that's accurate, will the city follow through and move the pole or work with the utility to move the pole? Considerations of that nature. I mean, if we're going to induce more pedestrian traffic, which in general terms we tend to like, this is the closest we've ever been to a railroad, though. We want to take the complete steps I'm envisioning, don't we? And are we committed to doing that?
Yeah, just in response, Councilman, I think, so this, a trail along the railroad is something that was contemplated and is actually in the active transportation plan. And so this development, or this proposed development does provide kind of the initial opportunity to kind of take a bite at that. And that's why, Planning Commission and others pushed hard for public easement on the trail. The crossing at Donald is something that is being worked through right now and will continue to be worked through as engineering goes through their approval of the civil plans and that connection. But we do have to be thoughtful about that connection, and just as you would with any crossing that's in that close proximity to a railroad crossing that's there. Now, thankfully, the railroad crossing is not as elevated as it is at, like, say, Cook or Andrews or other places. And so, but it is something to consider in terms of high visibility markings and maybe a pedestrian beacon or something to that effect, that because we do anticipate it will be used, that's why it's being built, to get people to Cove. And so you got to make it safe.
So if this is approved and gets built, the ribbon cutting is not July 1st. It's presumably takes some time, so the city would have a little bit of time to work on those kinds of things, right? And
yeah, and I'm not aware what their, pending a council's approval, I don't know what their construction timeline or any of those things are, but it's
so
not next week.
and if it's city budgetary capacity, I mean, I for one would go to bat for whatever the resources would be needed for the public side of that. So I don't know what Public Works is, their bottleneck or concern is. Sometimes it's budgetary, sometimes it's something else, but we should be able to resolve the budget side of that. Okay, all for now, thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I'll take the committee member first, Councilman Evans.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Assistant Director Boss and Paul, for walking us through this. There's a lot of great things happening here, I think. The inclusion of the public path that connects Thoreau to Donald in the park is just a wonderful asset for the neighborhood, so I applaud making that a priority. My concern is with, and I think Councilman Bullock was getting at this too, the buffer between the existing homes and the back of the units here. And for me, it comes down to, yeah, I see the variation in the siding colors, but it is, it's still kind of a little bit of a monotonous wall where there wasn't one before. And boy, some decent-sized trees could really start to break that up. But obviously, with a 5-foot buffer, you can't get a decent-sized tree in there. So I'd just like to hear the reasoning for why we can't, make that buffer wider, push everything south, so that just to have a little more breathing room between the existing homes and be able to get some trees in there that do start to make that view not quite so wall-like.
We've done a lot of pushing and pulling with this. Again, we were in front of Planning Commission 4 different times, working through different design recommendations, meeting with the neighbors to increase that as well too. The other thing that happens with this, I mean, we do have a 6-foot privacy fence that's along that way as well too. Again, what's going to give? Do we push those units even closer to the tracks? Do we not give them any front yard or landscaping right off of the public walkway in turn for providing a larger landscape buffer for the neighbors, which is really their backyard and is fully screened with very tall, mature evergreen trees? I think the work we've done with Planning Commission has struck a very good balance on the site for that.
You have any more questions?
No, not this time, no.
Councilperson Marks?
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Began. I do have some concerns for the neighbor's privacy with the lack of trees being tall enough to create a buffer. Because you have the decks on the second floor of the townhouses, you know, that really eliminates any privacy for the homeowners on the row in their backyards. So I would like to see taller trees too, however that could work. Even though you're going to have a fence, the fence is going to be a 6-foot high fence. But you have the back porches. At what elevation are those?
Those are, I think our first floor is like 10 feet.
So that really eliminates any privacy for the homeowners because they'll be looking right over that 6-foot high fence. And I do think, I mean, I was surprised when I saw this development because I was amazed that you could build anything on that piece of property. Although I'm happy that we're adding more housing to Lakewood, but that is really such a very narrow lot. And we're going to be losing that beautiful big oak tree that's at the back of that, on the west side of that lot as well.
Yeah, that oak tree is actually well past the end of its lifetime. The 3 trees that are there, the one tree that could be saved and reused is really not worthwhile, as we've had it assessed. And again, with the narrowness of this site, with us trying to make sure that we have adequate and appropriate space for the public walkway going through there, the requirements for the 20-foot width for the driveway for the fire department to go all the way through. Again, the balance I think that we struck with the layout that we have now that was approved at Planning Commission is really the best of both worlds. You know, most of the property owners, this is a side yard, except for Mr. Commode. This is, you know, he has a very large, 2 large lots in the back there. I don't know if Mr. Boss, if we can go to the rendering second page there. We tried as adequately as possible, one more, to show even going out on site and site measuring some of the trees and locating the number and location of the trees that Mr. Commode has planted on the other side on his particular property. So I understand the concern. I think adding another layer of trees on the other side of these trees is not going to really provide that much more of a screening buffer than what is already been prepared as far as having the fence and the landscaping buffer on that side of it.
Well, that is if they're not going to be trees that grow very tall, right? I mean, how tall, what type of trees are you planning to put, junipers or?
I'd have to look at my landscaping plan. I don't remember off the top of my head, but we did,
Yeah, you have
I can't quite see
junipers,
on
so
that thing there.
how tall will those grow?
Yeah. They're supposed to go, 8 to 10 feet, which is going to be higher than the fence, right? They're not going to be higher than Mr. Commode's trees.
Well, I can see the concern about the neighbor, especially Mr. Kermode, because he does have that very private piece of property that will no longer be private, because you'll have car traffic and people looking, sitting on, and I'm sure people will be sitting on those patios. I would be if I lived there. But it would really kind of deter on the privacy of Mr. Kermode's property. So I wish you could put some taller trees, but I understand if you don't have enough space to put a tree so it could grow, it is compromising for sure. I don't know what the solution for that could be. I think having, enough plantings there would be beneficial. And then also I know that there has been a concern about the light, which you say there will not be any street lamps there in that neighborhood. Everything will be directed just at the townhomes, right?
Correct.
Any other questions from members of council? No, I would like, we're getting close on time, but I would like to offer an opportunity for members of the public to speak on this. I know there are a couple here. Would anyone like to come speak? Come on up, name and address, and then.
Hey, I'm Dave Kermode, 1286 Thoreau. I think pretty clear. Two lots at the northern edge here in the middle. And thank you for your time. I'll try to keep it brief. Mostly, quite literally focused kind of on the northern side. You can vouch. It really does have a nice cart path from everybody walking. Path will be great. Like a lot of good elements. I've not dinged it on density, anything like that. Really is just kind of the interaction with the. Kind of everything to the north. I have neighbors on Donald, but they've all kind of submitted similar comments to the same effect. And we could actually go back to that evergreen one, because I think the issue is, for having gone out and field measured them, it cuts to about a third of the way on the eastern edge. They're all river birch trees that are pretty thin, don't do anything in the winter. You kind of get the full hit of about, anywhere from like 6, maybe 7 of them just seasonally, where like none of the evergreens I planted could really do much with that. And again, they're not quite that large yet, and one blight can wipe them out. So I think the hope is, for the magnitude of the change, that there's ultimately some buy-in kind of coming from the developer on that side. And I think in meeting with, speaking with like our Councilwoman Marks, again, thank you much for the time, but. I think a potential easy fix would be, again, if you were to pull, like, say, units 4 to 9 up against the sidewalk, you could push the kink about midway down the street, which ultimately would help if these bollards are gone from a traffic calming standpoint, where it would kind of, been a minute since I've worked in urban design, but usually kind of coming midway down the hill kind of helps to slow the traffic organically there. And again, if it would, assuming the bollards are gone, that would be a side benefit of it. And then ultimately, just larger canopy trees that could make up for loss of pin oaks, things like that. But I'll leave it to you, and thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other comments from members of council? So I was on planning commission in my role previous to council, and I appreciate Mr. Kermode's comments and thoughts, and those of my colleagues. I will say that, having watched some of the meetings, the planning commission meetings and the ABR meetings, we do appoint people to those boards, and so does the administration, to really dig into these issues. And I get a little nervous about us on council. We have the ability to say no, right? That is our power under the PUD code section. But I think they were pretty thoughtful, the boards and commissions, in reviewing all of this information and trying their best on the site. We do not have a lot of developable parcels that are easy to fit within zoning classifications in Lakewood. That was the intent of the plan development code section, was to enable creative infill development, push and pull. As I saw the site plan, it went from one thing to another thing to another thing. In fact, you see 4 renditions on this current page to show you that it has moved along. There are slight things about the site. The back wall isn't great, but I'm not an architect, and I have confidence in the folks that we appointed to ABR. Now, that said, I'm only one member of this committee, and ultimately, we can consider it more, or we can refer it favorably to full council. What I will say is anytime you're in Lakewood, you have neighbors that are close to you. On Planning Commission, I often joke that I think I got yelled at more by people on Planning Commission than I do on council, because when you change the use of someone's adjacent property, their neighbor, that affects their everyday life. And I appreciate that. I often tried to think about it in a role of, if I was the neighbor, how would I feel about that? And that's why the commission is made up of residents in Lakewood, who live this every day. So that said, there's push and pull on the site that, we can mess around with, but I'm interested in the committee members' view on kind of what action you'd like to take going forward.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Thanks. I agree that we want to be thoughtful. I also would like more time on this, and not a motion tonight, for a couple different reasons. First, it's also true that the Architectural Board of Review and the Planning Commission typically have only so much changes that they seek to accomplish or can accomplish. It's pretty rare for the Planning Commission or the Architectural Board of Review to say no, full stop to a project, even for Dollar Tree, or I probably shouldn't name certain businesses, but
in PUD, they do. So that's the distinction between a regular kind of Planning Commission or ABR issue and plan development. There are, and correct me if I'm wrong, Planning Department, but their approval's required in order for it to get to us. So that they have veto, just a...
Yeah, it's a fair point. It's a conversation. So I don't think anybody, first of all, I agree with the points. First of all, developers, thanks for your interest in investing in Lakewood and to enhance the housing stock. It's a lot of work. Mr. Began, I respect and know your work for many years. Thanks for your thoughtfulness here. So I think the goal is to have a quality and thoughtful dialogue. The iteration that's before us doesn't mean that it's, even though it's made through the Planning Commission and the Architectural Board of Review, doesn't mean that there aren't improvements that still could be achieved by City Council. And because this is a significant density increase and a character change, really the developments we've seen like this have existed on Madison and Detroit. This is north of the tracks. So it's off of Detroit, north of the tracks, pretty well into residential.
On Lake. There was one on Lake.
Lake is a good point, right. But it was replacing a gas station that was pretty unique.
McKinley Place, too.
McKinley Place is another excellent example. It's a replacing a former school, so embedded. So it's not unprecedented. And I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think that the conversation is a merited one. What I heard from the residents was the proposal is to increase the buffer for a couple of reasons. One is taller trees, to better transition to the neighborhood, to balance. There's a lot of neighbors who oppose this outright, okay? And to buffer the transition from a normal R2 district into a more dense proposed development, I think it's more than just cosmetic to pay careful attention to this. I also hear what you're saying on the development side. Everything comes at a cost, and you're trying to balance that. So, but I, for one, would like to see space for more larger trees, better transition, better buffering that would help us with our tree canopy goals, for example. And the proposal is not to reduce the unit count or add additional pavement, but to increase the buffer and increase the screening. That's the primary thing. I'm not an architect, but I am a common sense person, and I recall the Ryan Holmes segment of the development on the east, not far from City Hall. I'm blanking on the name of the development. Somebody help me out. Rockport Square. So one of the phases of the Rockport Square, I mean, those look pretty blocky. There are different phases of that, and actually some of those phases that are right on Detroit have compact front yards of the kind that I think a couple of the units in these renderings have, and they do it successfully because it's that character of that urban. So I don't think that it's unreasonable for us to take some time to ensure some quality here. So I'd like to have more dialogue with this proposal before I would consider a vote to recommend.
Yeah, the challenge, and I would ask the planning department, I don't think we're at a stage where we can tweak this site plan on council. I think it would have to go back to the boards and commissions. So we'd have to deny it, have to go back to the boards and commissions, and then they could tweak it, right? Is that the proper procedure?
I think the code reads you have 45 days to take action on it. I think that action is either approve or deny. I look to the law department for any clarification.
Thank you, Assistant Director. Through the chair, I don't have the ordinance in front of me. I'd be glad to look at it. My recollection is the language is quite clear, the 45 days, and it says what role council will play. But I'd be glad to look at it and speak to you this evening.
So Mr. Chair, a motion to defer tonight in committee is not a motion to deny.
Understood, but there isn't a way this site plan can change unless we deny it, is my understanding of this situation.
Yeah, I'm fairly confident if there's consensus that we'd want to make some improvements, we could figure out a way to do it procedurally.
Any insight from the other committee member here?
Yeah, I'm not opposed to what Councilman Bullock is talking about. Just taking another look at this, having some more conversation, and deferring it for right now.
Thinking about schedule and to the administration, if we go beyond the 45 days, I don't, scheduling with the council clerk and other housing planning development committee, I'm sure we could fit it in. The challenge I have, and this is, I think we're doing our job in whether or not to approve or deny this. However, our boards and commissions did their job, and I guess we can say no, go back to the drawing board. I am mindful of what that tells folks who want to do infill development in our city, that if you go through our process and do what our boards and commissions tell you to do and take their input and then we say no, I am mindful of what the message that sends. So that is my caution. But at the same time, if we want to take more time, there are 3 people on this committee, and if 2 people want to do it, then that's what we're going to do. So that's what we're going to do if that's what you guys want to do.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I hear you on precedents and so forth. It's also a precedent to say that we can take time to double check and be thoughtful on quality. And of course, the proposal has quality too, so that isn't intended to be a negative statement. It's a conversation and developing consensus around where that falls. So I do think that there's a difference between approve everything as given to us versus deny and send a chilling effect on all future development. I think there's a middle ground, and that's the intent of what I've been talking about.
Yeah, I do think that in the development world, time is money. So, and I don't know what their option contract with the railroad looks like, but having worked tangentially in this field, right now it's a patch of grass owned by an out-of-state railroad that doesn't have much of an interest in doing anything for Lakewood. And if this development goes through, we have a connection for certainly nearly 500 to 1,000 homes over to Cove Park, where they have to go north to Clifton. So I think that this is not a perfect site plan, but I think it is the best you can do on this site with what the live conditions are of the shape of the parcel. But so I guess my suggestion would be, if we want the site plan to change, I think we have to deny this. We have to not pass this ordinance and send it back to Planning Commission, because that's our only option, is to say no or to approve it.
Mr. Chair, I just, not to interject, but I mean, I believe you have I misspoke. You probably have the same three options that our boards and commissions have. You can approve, deny, or approve with conditions. I just don't know, and that's why I would look for interpretation in terms of the scale and scope of the conditions at this stage that might negate previous subordinate approvals by boards and commissions.
So I guess, yeah, that's what I need. If we can say, move that building forward 5 foot, and then it is now approved, are we allowed to do that?
I think that would fall under a substantial shift in terms of the site plan design. It's just something that we struggle between ABR and Planning Commission as well, in terms of the kind of concurrent approvals, and one approval that may conflict with or negate another approval that was already given. You just have to be very mindful of that in terms of the authorities that are invested in both the ABR and the Planning Commission by our charter and our codes. You know, Planning Commission is given certain authorities for approving PDs subject to council approval. Architectural board review is given the same level of authority in terms of site plan, building elevations, material choices, all those things. And so I'm trying to be thoughtful here in terms of how we treat something that if a plan through value engineering or something that changes in terms of the permitting process, in terms of the scale and scope of that, you have to send it back to ABR if it's a substantial enough change for a modification to a previous approval. And so I just don't know in terms of, at this level, in terms of where that scale and scope, you know, would lie. And so that's why I think my initial statement of approve and deny is kind of where we're at. Although I do believe you probably have the third in terms of approval with conditions, but those conditions just need to be thoughtful in terms of the previous approvals that were provided.
Yes, and so what I will say is I think the council president's a little upset. We've gone over 13 minutes, and I see our new council members back here where to get pictures taken. So I do commit to the applicant to reschedule this as quickly as possible, another Housing Planning and Development Committee. I'd be comfortable passing it tonight. But I don't control this committee. I merely administratively lead it, so I can't do that. So is there a motion on the table? And what I would say is I commit all of us to doing the work so that we get out of this applicant's way and this resident's way and make our decision so that they can do what they have to do. So is there a motion, Mr. Bullock?
Yeah, I'd move to defer for tonight with the intent to hold a hearing, a follow-up hearing as soon as possible. It seems that January 27 is potentially open.
Okay. Is there a second to that
I'll
motion?
second the motion.
All right. The motion's on the table. We will commit to getting something on the committee docket as quickly as possible. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
And without objection, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you. Kevin, do you want to start with the group or individual? That's what I'm thinking before we scatter. So, council members, if we can gather for the group shot first, and then we'll do individual.
Calling my stuff junk?
I don't know. I'd ask, Jen would normally speak to that because she's got the experience with it, but I don't think it's.
Dave, your mic's on.
They got it. nerve-wracking.
All right, we'll call to order the January 21st meeting of full council. If you're able, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. We'll now pause for a moment of silence. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Baker,
Here.
Bullock,
Here.
Evans, Keppel,
Here.
Marks, Streebig.
Here.
Reading and disposal of the minutes of the regular meeting of council held January 6, 2025.
Move to approve without the necessity of a reading.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Item 1, report from Committee of the Whole held January 13, 2025.
Dear colleagues, Committee of the Whole met January 13th to continue the process of filling the vacant at-large council seat. The process began December 2nd, 2024, when the committee met to decide which among the 12 applicants would receive interviews. 3 candidates were interviewed on January 6th: Alexandra Bonacuse, Becky Mahovic, and Nicole Greenfield. 3 candidates were interviewed on January 13th: Allison Urbanik, Angela Klunk, and Angelina Steiner. After all interviews were completed, the committee entered executive session to discuss the merits of each candidate as well as the robust community feedback on the candidates. After exiting executive session, a motion was adopted to amend Resolution 2024-71 to insert the name Angelina Hamilton Steiner. Ms. Hamilton Steiner brings a diverse set of skills and experiences to council, having served and led on a number of volunteer boards and commissions. Ms. Hamilton Steiner is the co-founder and treasurer of a grassroots organization, the Madison Court Community Coalition, MC3. MC3 was formed in response to an incident of gun violence at Madison Park in 2021. Since then, MC3 has sustained a positive, proactive presence at the park, improving the safety and usability of the park for neighbors and visitors citywide. A favorable vote on the following resolution will make Ms. Hamilton Steiner's appointment official. The committee would like to thank all the candidates who bravely stepped forward for consideration. We greatly appreciate your willingness to serve and the opportunity to hear about your vision for Lakewood. Move to receive and file that report.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Item 2, substitute resolution 2024-71, a resolution to take effect immediately, appointing Angelina Steiner to the office of at-large member of council on Lakewood City Council, beginning immediately and ending December 31st, 2025.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Councilman Bullock.
Madam President, thank you. I look forward to very soon supporting this motion to appoint Ms. Steiner. There she is in the audience, and working with her as a colleague. I've gotten to know you, Angelina, a little bit as a very, very dedicated citizen, and it'll be good to have the opportunity to deepen that relationship further and serve our community. So almost congratulations.
Councilperson Streeling.
Thank you. Thank you for recognizing me, President Keppel, and thank you for leading us through another professional and detailed process of filling a vacancy on City Council. Excellent. I'm thankful for all the very qualified candidates that applied and interviewed and are ready now to serve our community as well. I'm happy to welcome our newest colleague to this council with this historic appointment. And I'm looking forward to working with Councilmember Steiner on ways to improve the experience of living and working in Lakewood for all our neighbors and our guests. I'd like to welcome and congratulate our new colleague, and thank you for your prior work to include, with respect and dignity, all of Lakewood residents in your prior engagements. Thank you.
Other colleagues? Vice President Baker.
Thank you, President Keppel. And I'll just say that, you know, these are always the hardest decisions we make on council. I mentioned at the end of our executive session, we should all commit to not resigning or taking new positions because filling vacancies is hard. We had a lot of great candidates. A lot of people are really engaged. We have a lot of talent in Lakewood. And as I stated, Councilperson Keppel and I got involved in government at the same time. We went for the same position. She got it. I didn't. I still stayed involved, and here we are as colleagues, and we work really well together. So I'd encourage the folks that didn't get it to continue to stay involved. And then to Ms. Steiner, it's clear you do the work. That's what we need up here. So we need the work to get done. So I look forward to welcoming you as a colleague and getting the work done. So thanks.
Councilman Evans.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Excited to welcome Angelina up here with us. I haven't had the chance to get to know you before this, but your work in the community speaks for itself. So I think you'll be a great asset to this body, and looking forward to getting to know you and to working with you. So thank you.
Councilmember Marks.
Well, Ms. Steiner, I welcome you on board of council. I know that this has been an exciting endeavor for you, and I look forward to working with you and making some great changes here in the city. So welcome on board.
Thank you. And I'll just add, I noted it in my committee of the whole report. To Vice President Baker's comment, we did have really tremendous candidates. So it is really, we are very fortunate here in Lakewood to have so many folks who are willing to serve. And in this particular go-around, we happened to interview all women for the position. So to have so many smart, intelligent, capable women here in Lakewood who are willing to serve was also really a delight to interact with them. Ms. Steiner, Hamilton Steiner, has really shown throughout her service to our community an absolute dedication that has shown through her ability to organize folks, her ability to work with people in all different settings. The letters we got in support of her candidacy really showed the depth and breadth of that experience and dedication. So we're very excited to have you eminently join us up here on council. So after we do have a couple of public comments on this, so I'll take those now. After that, we will take the vote on this, and then Judge Neff has graciously agreed to join us tonight for Ms. Hamilton Steiner's oath of office. So after that will be official, and after the oath, we'll invite folks to come up if you want to get a picture afterwards. So just laying out process, we're going to, we'll do the public comment, then we'll vote, then oath of office, then picture. All right, so after all that, so we do have one e-comment from Mr. Robert Organ, who, if you've come to council meetings before, you've likely heard him speak. He's unfortunately able to not be with us tonight, but he noted congratulations to incoming councilperson Hamilton Steiner, and he looks forward to working with you to make Lakewood a safe place for people outside of private automobiles. And then I know we also have Nathan Lizanich is signed in to speak. So Nathan, if you want to come up, you can have up to 5 minutes, and if you want to state your name and address for the record, and you can take it away. Yeah, that's okay. Well, it's for the picture, so if you just push the, yep, there you go.
All right. What am I supposed to say again?
Just your name and address, and then whatever you would like.
Oh, Nathan Lizanich, 1617 Robinwood. All right. Good evening, City Council members of Lakewood. Angelina, I wanted to go on a public record saying congratulations. You deserve this so much. Yeah, wow. I'm like looking at you saying this and losing my train of thought. City Council, you did a great thing here for the city of Lakewood and its residents, and you also did a great thing for yourselves, bringing Angelina on board, bringing her voice into your meetings that you have. And I'm confident she's going to do wonderful things. So, again, congratulations, Angelina.
Thank you. All right. I believe that's the only person we have signed in to speak, unless if anyone else on this topic. And if not, then on the, I don't see anyone. So on the motion to adopt the resolution to appoint Angelina Hamilton Steiner to the position of councilmember at large, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Item 3, oath of office of at-large member of council, Angelina Hamilton Steiner.
All right, so Angelina, if you want to come up, and if your girls or anybody else wants to come up with you, they sure can.
The one that dances doesn't want to come up here.
I know.
Yeah, it's usually faced that way so that Kevin can get the picture with the seal.
This way?
Yeah,
Oh.
I believe that's intentional, yeah.
Is anyone coming? No. Okay. So repeat after me. Raise your right hand. I, Angelina Hamilton Steiner,
I, Angelina Hamilton Steiner,
recognizing my duty to the citizenry of Lakewood, Ohio,
recognizing my duty to the citizenry of Lakewood, Ohio,
do solemnly promise and swear
do solemnly promise and swear
that I will support the Constitution and laws
that I will support the Constitution and laws
of the United States of America,
of the United States of America,
the Constitution and statutes
the Constitution and statutes
of the state of Ohio,
of the state of Ohio,
and the Third Amended Charter and ordinances
and the Third Amended Charter and ordinances
of the city of Lakewood,
of the city of Lakewood,
that I will not be influenced by any consideration
that I will not be influenced by any considerations
except that of merit and fitness
except that of merit and fitness
in the appointment or discharge of employees,
in the appointment and discharge of employees,
that I will not make or authorize
that I will not make or authorize
the expenditure of public money
the expenditure of public money
otherwise than for adequate consideration
otherwise than for adequate consideration
for efficient service to the city of Lakewood,
for efficient service to the city of Lakewood,
and that I will faithfully and impartially
and that I will faithfully and impartially
discharge and perform
all of the duties incumbent upon me
as the at-large member of council
for the unexpired term
ending December 31st, 2025,
ending December 31st, 2025,
according to the best of my ability and understanding.
according to the best of my ability and understanding.
I affirm and declare.
I affirm and declare.
Congratulations.
Thank you. All right, and if folks want to gather right here in front, anyone who wants to come up and get a picture with our newest council colleague, please do so.
Back up just a little bit, yeah. That's good, right there. I can do one phone too if you want.
Oh, yes.
Just testing. All right, here's the real one. All right. Ready? 1, 2, 3. One more. All right.
All right, everybody, hold on.
It's my professional photographer.
All right. Perfect. Thank you, everybody.
Should I make a motion for that? Okay. All right, so we'll go ahead and move to receive and file the oath of office.
Second?
Motion's been made and second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. And that motion passes.
Item 4, report from Housing Planning and Development Committee regarding meeting held tonight, January 21st, 2025.
That would be you, Vice President Baker.
Thank you, Council President. We had one docket item, but it was a robust discussion. It was Ordinance 38, 2024, which was an ordinance to amend the zoning code for a planned development on Donald and Thoreau. It's an interesting parcel that's near the railroad tracks, adjacent to Cove Park. Really good discussion from the administration and the developer, a couple neighbors. Some of the committee members had some further questions that they'd like explored a little bit more. So we've committed to having a follow-up committee hearing likely next week to hopefully resolve some of those questions and provide some clarity to the applicant going forward. So that's the report. Thank you.
I'll move to receive and file that oral report.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Item 5, Ordinance 38, 2024, an ordinance to amend Section 110502 of the zoning code of codified ordinances by changing and revising the zoning map of the city with respect to certain property as set forth and described as the Donald and Thoreau Development Project from R2 to PD.
Move to defer.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Item 6, communication from President Keppel regarding council committee assignments.
All right, dear colleagues, the following committee assignments are effective immediately. Most of these are pretty similar with the movement of Councilman Evans to chairing Public Works and Sustainability, and where we see our new at-large appointee. So Councilwoman Hamilton Steiner, those will be your appointments as well as right now. So I'll move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Item 7, communication from President Keppel regarding Tree Advisory and Education Board, council ex officio member.
Dear colleagues, on January 1st, 2025, former Councilman Rader's resignation from City Council caused a vacancy in Council's ex officio seat on the Tree Advisory and Education Board. Instead of filling the expired term as we normally would, the following ordinance proposes to amend the code to restructure the process of appointing council's member of the Tree Advisory and Education Board. Rather than going through the regular process of nominating and voting to appoint a colleague every 3 years or less if there's a change on council, though hopefully there won't be for a while, I propose to have the role automatically assigned to the chair of the Public Works and Sustainability Committee. The following ordinance, if adopted, would accomplish this. This approach, the same that was taken with the Community Health Action Team, streamlines the appointment process, ensures that council has uninterrupted representation on the board, and helps create synergies among council, the administration, and the public in regard to the important topic of trees. Your quick consideration is appreciated to ensure that the tree board is at full capacity and that council's voice is represented. Move to receive and file that communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. And I'll just add, part of the reason when I looked at this was also the way the ordinance is originally written. In addition to the council having an ex officio member, the administration has an ex officio member, which is the Public Works Director or their designee, which is typically the streets, Sam, I was trying to give his actual title, but yes, we all know Sam Bonavista, but the Streets and Forestry Manager. And that person just stays on, so that creates some continuum. So the same thing here with the idea of that council's ex officio member would just stay on, so that it creates some continuity. As well as makes sense for the Chair of Public Works and Sustainability, since they deal with trees, to be that person. So that was the rationale, but happy to discuss further if anyone has comments or questions. Vice President Baker.
Is your quick consideration mean you'd like it adopted this evening, or?
Yeah, that would be my preference, just because that way this person, then we would have our appointee in place for the next Tree Advisory and Education Board meeting, since we missed January, since Tristan was out and we didn't meet in time to appoint them. So that way we'd have our person in place. So that would be my preference, but I'm open to thoughts about that. Any further discussion?
Madam Chair?
Councilman
Madam
Bullock.
President, rather. No objection from me. I think it's a sensible approach. If in the future the chair didn't want to serve or couldn't, do we envision there's an informal ability to have an alternate serve? And can you also remind me, who's the Community Health Action Team council designee under the ordinance? I'm forgetting.
Sure, that would be the Health and Human Services Chair, which is Councilwoman Marks. So that makes sense too, as Community Health Action Team, Health and Human Services Chair. And then I could look at the actual ordinance legislation if it says, we'll pull that up next, but we could always amend it to say the Public Works and Sustainability Chair or their designee, if that would be a preference. I don't have strong feelings about that. Being council, we can always adopt the legislation in the future too, so if we needed to do that as well. Any further discussion on the communication? All right. Hearing none on the motion to receive and file the communication, all those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Item 8, ordinance 01-2025, an ordinance to take effect immediately, amending section 15202, membership, tree advisory task force, to change the manner in which the council representative is appointed.
I'd like to first, is there any further discussion on the ordinance itself? All right, then I will move to suspend the rules to adopt on first reading.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes. And then I will move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Item 9, communication from Law Director Vargo regarding AT&T tariff application.
Director Vargo.
Thank you, Madam President, members of City Council. This resolution addresses the recent tariff application filed by AT&T with the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. Under the tariff, AT&T proposes that the cities would pay full costs of any relocation of AT&T's facilities within the public right-of-way if a city requires, regardless of the reason. State law today places this financial burden on the utility company, AT&T, absent an approved tariff by the Commission. So the Commission will approve AT&T's tariff application within 30 days by rule without challenge by affected municipalities. The timing of this was such that that 30-day period expired January 17. Because it did, and that was prior to this evening, the city indicated to the Ohio Municipal League that it intended to join the league to oppose this tariff before the Commission. Opposition to this tariff is in the interests of the taxpayers, the administration believes, because it would put this financial burden on these large telecommunication companies and take the burden off of the taxpayers. So the city gave that indication to the league because of the deadline. This resolution, though, would memorialize and evidence that joining in the opposition, and it's requested by the league to have a resolution because it's very effective for the commission, the regulatory body, to look at the stack of resolutions and understand these are the cities with a vested interest in opposing this. Now, there have been recent developments. On Friday, we learned that AT&T withdrew its tariff application. So the status quo remains. However, in our consultations with the league, the attorney for the league, it is understood that AT&T is seeking to modify the tariff, work with potential affected stakeholders such as cities, and then refile the tariff application. So for the sake of efficiency, we could, it is still, the resolution before this body is still relevant, and if approved, it would eliminate the need for the administration to come back to council and get that resolution passed on the assumption that AT&T will continue with this effort to get this financial burden shifted to the cities. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Vargo. Do we know, in terms of, you said that they're coming, AT&T, we expect them to come back. Do we know, and working with municipalities, so the proposal could look differently, so would we anticipate that we might want to amend any of the language of the resolution to address specific elements of a future? I know it's hard to look into the future on these things, but your thoughts about that?
Thank you, Madam President. The resolution simply authorizes the city of Lakewood to join the opposition to the tariff. So on the assumption that the city would want to oppose the tariff, regardless of the item of opposition, regardless of the reason, regardless of the extent of the tariff that would give rise to the opposition, it simply authorizes and evidences the opposition. The law department believes under the charter and under the ordinances that council need not authorize this opposition as it's an administrative task. But again, the regulatory body, PUCO, is very interested in the level of opposition to the tariff, and they will see hard copies of resolutions, and it makes the opposition more visual to the commission. Thank you.
All right. Well, first let me move to receive and file the communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion from colleagues. Vice President Baker.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Director Vargo and the Law Department. This is really important, especially as we talk about, you know, the rights of way in our city are city property. So giving some entity, some state entity, the ability to just put whatever they want wherever they want it, which is some of the state law has given utilities certain rights within our property to do things. And this would further erode our ability to design and implement our own streets and where we want our catch basins to be and where we want the sidewalks and the curb bump outs to be. So this is really important, and I forwarded along the Law Department, and they were already on it, so thank you for your diligence there. But it's a really big issue, especially as we think about ways in which we want to make our streets safer and ways in which we want to, you know, change the way our streets are currently designed. The utilities are all in there, spaghetti soup, and if they start making us pay for, you know, all those things, then it becomes more expensive to implement change. Thank you.
It's a good point, actually. In the committee meeting tonight, we were just talking about how there's a utility pole in the way of a potential sidewalk that we wanted to move. So it's a good point. Council members, any further discussion?
Madam President.
Bullock. Yep.
Thank you. I was not aware of this issue previously. I'm glad that the administration and Councilman Baker apparently are paying attention to it. I do, in my full-time work, unrelated to city government, work on other Public Utilities Commission of Ohio issues, and so I'm somewhat familiar with the process, and I agree with the law director's point that speaking up strongly and forcefully can make an impact and is important, and I'm not sure why the utility is up to what it's up to, but I sure as heck think it's unfair, and utilities sometimes try to do that. So if there's other, there may be public comment that we could make individually or something. I'd be happy to do that in addition to this resolution, but I'll support the motion tonight. Thanks.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, on the motion to receive and file the communication, all those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Item 10, Resolution 2025-01, a resolution to take effect immediately supporting the Ohio Municipal League's challenge of AT&T's tariff.
Move to adopt.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Item 11, communication from Finance Director Mahoney regarding 2025 first quarter transfers.
Director Mahoney.
Dear President Keppel and members of council, the 2025 first quarter transfer ordinance reflects 25% of the total anticipated transfers between funds that were included within the 2025 appropriations. This also includes advances back to the general fund that were made to the respective funds at the end of 2024. Please place on the appropriate reading and refer to the Finance Committee if necessary for further discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll move to receive and file the communication.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion. Councilman Bullock, I assume you would prefer that those do get referred to Finance Committee? Yep. Okay, great. All right. On the motion to refer the communication, or to receive and file the communication, all those in favor? Aye. And that motion passes.
Item 12, Ordinance 2, 2025, an ordinance to take effect immediately authorizing the transfer in advance of certain funds.
Move to refer to Finance.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Item 13, communication from Finance Director Mahoney regarding 2025 municipal capital lease in amount not to exceed $3.61 million.
Director Mahoney.
Dear President Keppel and members of council, attached is an ordinance to request quotes for municipal capital leases in the amount not to exceed $3.61 million for the following capital equipment: fire ambulance, forestry bucket truck, 5 police vehicles, refuse rear load packer truck, refuse automated side load packer truck, public works generator, sewer cleaning truck, 2 streets plow dump trucks, and 3 sewer dump trucks. I respectfully request that this legislation be placed on first reading and referred to the Finance Committee for further review and discussion.
Thank you. Councilman Bullock, would it be helpful to have this communication with the ordinance to see the list? Would you like it referred as well? Okay. So I'll move to refer the communication to Finance.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion. Councilwoman Strebe.
Thank you. Just as this goes to the Finance Committee, Director Gordon, could we get a fleet sheet or something along those lines so when we start to look at what we're proposing with these vehicles so that we could know how many dump trucks do we have, how many are we replacing, something that would give us a little more information on that?
Yeah, I could come up with something for you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Any further discussion on the motion to refer the communication to Finance? On that motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Item 14, Ordinance 3, 2025, an ordinance to take effect immediately authorizing the Director of Finance to enter into equipment leases and forms approved by the Director of Law on behalf of the City of Lakewood.
Move to refer to Finance.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
And that motion passes.
Item 15, communication from Finance Director Mahoney regarding 2025 bond anticipation notes.
Director Mahoney again.
It's my turn tonight. Dear President Keppel and members of council, ordinances relating to the 2025 bond anticipation notes in an amount not to exceed $26.375 million used to finance capital improvement projects. Ordinance relating to the 2025 bond anticipation notes refunding in the amount not to exceed $6.32 million used to finance capital improvement projects. These bond anticipation notes are for prior year projects still under construction. Another one-year note will be issued to repay or roll those prior year notes. The $26.275 million in new notes corresponds to the city's 2025 capital improvement program paid via bond anticipation notes and were included in the 2025 budget and budget hearings. Those include $2.2 million in street improvements, $4,050,000 facility improvements, $9,325,000 water improvements, $300,000 sidewalk, $500,000 in parks, and $10 million in sewer improvements. I respectfully request that this legislation be placed on first reading and referred to the Finance Committee for further review and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, I think it might be helpful to have the communication in finance too, as this is laid out in regular English for those of us who don't have a degree in finance. So I'll move to refer the communication to finance.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. And that motion passes. And then I will next move to suspend the rules to read items 16 through 22 together.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. And that motion passes.
Item 16, Ordinance 4, 2025. An ordinance authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $6.32 million in anticipation of the issuance of bonds to pay costs of constructing a refuse recycling facility, renovating refuse truck parking facility, replacing or improving the roofs of public buildings, including the municipal facilities garage, improving the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems at the fire station, improving parks, including pavement and sidewalk resurfacing and construction, lighting and landscaping, together with all necessary site work, infrastructure improvements, and appurtenances thereto, improving sidewalks within the city and improving Bunce Road, Crest Lane, Gill Avenue, Onondaga Avenue, Wayne Avenue, and Webb Road, and other streets located within the city between certain termini by resurfacing and replacing concrete, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and retiring notes previously issued for such purposes and approving related matters. Item 17, Ordinance 5, 2025, an ordinance to take effect immediately, authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $2.2 million in anticipation of the issuance of bonds to pay costs of improving Edgewater Drive, Summit Avenue, and other streets located within the city between certain termini by resurfacing and replacing concrete, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and approving related matters. Item 18, Ordinance 6, 2025, an ordinance to take effect immediately, authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $4,050,000 in anticipation of the issuance of bonds to pay costs of improving City Hall, Winterhurst Ice Arena, Fire Station Number 3, Public Works Garage, and other city facilities, including renovating city facilities, improving the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning systems, constructing a storage facility.
Ordinance 7-2025, an ordinance to take effect immediately, authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $9,325,000 in anticipation of the issuance of bonds to pay costs of designing, engineering, and constructing water improvements, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and approving related matters. Ordinance 8-2025, an ordinance to take effect immediately, authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $300,000 in anticipation of the issuances of bonds to pay costs of improving sidewalks within the city and approving related matters. Item 21, Ordinance 9-2025, an ordinance to take effect immediately, authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $500,000 in anticipation of the issuance of bonds to pay costs of improving parks within the city, including Lakewood Park, Kaufman Park, and other park improvements, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and approving related matters. Item 22, Ordinance 10-2025, an ordinance to take effect immediately, authorizing the issuance of notes in the amount of not to exceed $10 million in anticipation of the issuance of bonds to pay costs of designing, engineering, and constructing sewer improvements, together with all necessary appurtenances thereto, and approving related matters.
Right. I will move to refer items 16 through 22 to finance.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Vice President Baker.
Thank you, Council President. And Director Mahoney, as we have these discussions in the Finance Committee, I know we've talked a couple times about, what can we do as interest rates go up to kind of reduce our borrowing. So I'd be interested in having a candid conversation with the administration and our bond counsel, who I assume is going to be there as well, as to kind of what we're doing. I assume these are like maximums, and we can borrow up to that, but then we keep it under. But it'd be helpful to know where we think it's going to be, if we're going to hit the caps on some of these, or if we're going to borrow under. And I do know that we had a little bit, I think in reviewing the year-end financials, we collected maybe $1 million more in income tax than we initially budgeted. So understanding how that might interplay with our bond offerings would really be helpful. So thank you.
Great. Any further discussion?
Madam President?
Councilmember Bullock.
Thank you. First of all, I welcome the discussion that Councilman Baker is alluding to. If there are opportunities to revisit our debt strategy, A, it's always good to do, and B, I don't know how recently we've revisited that. I know over the years we've looked at our different debt series and have done a good job of consolidating them and tactically repositioning them, but from a bigger picture budgetary perspective, I think that's a good topic for us to delve into. Secondly, thank you for all the work that goes into this series of ordinances tonight. Is a lot of analysis and preparation, so we look forward to the conversation. The council clerk suggested to me that we ought to discuss a little tonight on the floor, if possible, about scheduling or schedule availability for this hearing, because I think, Director Mahoney, we would want to be able to get the outside experts that you work with to a hearing. Is that correct?
That's correct. So yes, as soon as we know a date, we can let them know to make sure that they can be here.
Or pair of dates or something, So Council President, I don't know if you have thoughts, but Director Mahoney, I guess we've got 3 readings here under regular order to allow ourselves a little bit of time. So the third reading would be February 17. So, I defer, I guess, to the Council President here about what Monday evenings are more or less open. But, I'm wide open. I got nothing to do other than, yeah.
Yeah, I think it sounded like we need to work in a housing planning and development meeting as well. But looks like at the moment, January 27th and February 10th. And I'm looking at the council clerk.
Those are the two I'm thinking of, but now that housing planning and development's taking the 27th, the 10th would probably be the best.
So, yeah, we could potentially do both on the 27th since there's not a full council meeting that night. So, so why don't, and I don't know if you need 1 or 2 meetings, so you could try the 27th and then add on the 10th, or
okay,
you and Kyle fight about that.
We can continue.
We're both on both committees.
Yes, so you guys.
And then of course, all council members, it's a worthwhile annual financial checkup and hearing. It's a little technical, but on the other hand, it's also how we traditionally have had the ability to pay for all of our capital projects, and so that's in some ways kind of half of our budget. It's not financially half of our budget, but it's important discussion. So please join if you can. Thanks.
Great, thank you. All right. Any further discussion on the motion to refer to finance? All right, hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. And that motion passes.
Item 23, December 2024 Finance Department Vendor Report submitted pursuant to Lakewood Codified Ordinance 11103.
I'll move to receive and file.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor? Aye. And that motion passes.
Item 24, liquor permit, Bunce Brothers, 17114 Detroit Avenue.
Right, and our custom to refer to, this is Ward 1, I believe. So Vice President Baker.
Thank you. Yeah, I see no statutory reason to object. There was a public comment. I don't know why it's not showing up on here. Maybe it was more general public comment about it. It's, I believe, a vape smoke shop, and they want the ability to sell liquor to go, essentially, not to consume on premises. And the law department, I just asked if there was any statutory reason that we could have objected.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. Councilman Bullock. Actually, the license is for carry-out of beer and wine. And this is not just a vape shop, it's a coffee shop. And it's a combined operation. For over 30 years, there's been a Supreme Court decision, Ohio Supreme Court decision, saying that the regulation of who gets a license to sell beer and wine, carry out, is exclusively the domain of the state through the Division of Liquor Control. Municipalities have no ability to decide who gets to sell beer and wine based on whether the city likes the shop or doesn't like the shop. There's been challenges to gas stations selling the, alcohol. The Supreme Court has struck those local restrictions down and said this is a matter of state regulation. The state statute provides statutory reasons why the state would deny somebody a license. The municipality, working with the police department, runs a check on the operator and the location and gives information. And so the law department compares the information that the police chief provides to us, compares it against the statutory reasons for opposition set forth in the revised code. If there are reasons set forth, then the city has the ability to request a hearing with the State Division of Liquor Control. The reason cited in the public comment is not in the statutory basis, and it's really the paradigm of opposition presented in the past that the courts have struck down as being outside the authority of the municipality. Thank you.
Thank you, and I think that's a helpful reminder to all of us as ward council people about what our role here is in state supremacy in that vein. Could you give us some examples of like statutory reasons that are reasonable?
Yes, through the president, thank you, Councilman. The criminal background of the applicant, if the applicant has substance abuse issues, if the entity is in a neighborhood, for example, the state doesn't know that unless it hears from the locality, but the statute says if even though it's zoned commercial, if it's in a neighborhood and therefore there are noise issues and sobriety issues that might affect the character of the neighborhood, we're allowed to object. Statutory reason is if it's within 500 feet of one of our parks. If the physical structure is such that law enforcement cannot get to the stored alcohol. The number of licenses already issued by the state in that area. If the operator has been convicted of a crime involving food stamps. So that's not exhaustive, but I have the statute here, and I was referring to it in response to your question to just give you some idea of what those reasons are.
Thank you, and I, since you had already done the research, I figure I'd give you the opportunity to educate the rest of my council colleagues about ways that are legitimate for us to object. So I really appreciate you looking into that, and to that point, I see no statutory reason to object to this current application.
Thank you. And thank you, Director Vargo, for providing us with that background as well, and Chief Fisher for providing the report. So appreciate that. All right. So I will move to file without objection.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any further discussion?
Madam President?
Councilman Bullock.
So I'm going to oppose this motion, and the reason is I'm persuaded by the public comment here, and I did hear exactly what the dialogue here. It was helpful. This came up some years ago. The state necks down the statutory reasons, and I recall this. I think there's one time when there was an active narcotics investigation when the city was able to deny. There was another time, though, years ago when there was a lot of chronic problems at a bar, and it was going to fall short of the statutory reason to object. So I agree with the law department and the police department's review and assessment. I agree with the thoughtfulness of Councilman Baker's point. I'd like, nevertheless, to send a different message. The community reason to object the city could, if it wanted to, file with an objection, and then that would go to the state agency or board, and there would be a dialogue there. I'm sure that the state Supreme Court would, well, I assume the state Supreme Court would rule consistently, but sometimes if a community makes the effort, we send a message, make a point, and certainly the applicant would have to be there and be present and be diligent in his application. So, I just want to read this briefly, or an excerpt from Mr. Corrigan, who wrote us, this shop was only recently established and is one of many that has opened up in recent years. Vape shops, I note that myself. Vaping is extremely addictive, targets the young and the most vulnerable. Adding alcohol sales will only promote and make it easier for consumers to be in vaping while they purchase alcohol. The location was established as a vape shop, and now the proposal is to expand alcohol sales at this location, stay in business, and to possibly promote vape sales to our citizens. I agree with that. So I'm not, this is kind of an impromptu thing based on me reading this comment, but we've got a lot of, I'm not sure vape shops are the highest and best use in the city of Lakewood, but boy, do we have a number of them. And if we're going to now have vape plus alcohol, I understand where the citizen's coming from. So just wanted to share my thoughts. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, Director Vargo.
Thank you, Madam President. I know council is aware of this, but I was informed that in years past, the Assistant Law Director, based on council instructions, did request a hearing before the State Department of Liquor Control on 2 or 3 occasions on just these types of policy issues. It required the law department representative to attend downtown the meeting to make the case. The case was resoundingly rejected in each of the cases. So I don't deny the right of any council person to oppose this or to instruct the law department to go make an opposition, but it is, in the estimation of the law department, fruitless and an unwise use of time by the law department. So I just want to state that so each member of council knows that. Thank you.
Vice President Baker.
Yeah, and to that point, and Councilman Bullock, you raised good points, and I've recently gotten a lot of constituent complaints about signage at vape shops, so I'm working with the planning department to see what our existing regulations are about signage being content neutral for any commercial district in Lakewood. But I'm mindful of this fact, which is city resources. Our law department works really hard, and you want to pick a case with good facts to ensure your victory and to ensure the ability to set good precedent for the city. If we object in a way that we will get trounced, then that is we don't exactly use city resources well, and we indicate to state agencies that we may not be taken seriously when we object for reasonable grounds. So that's why, while I understand the point of this public comment, and I in some ways agree to it, I also understand the strictures of which the state is supreme in a lot of areas, and I encourage all of us to lobby our state representative to change those rules. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll also note the signage on vape shops is something that has also come to my attention recently and something to be looked at, as well as, as we've had some conversation in the past, thought about in terms of, we have a limit on the number of tattoo shops that we can have in Lakewood. We have a limit on the number of dispensaries. So there are other ways to look at this issue as well in terms of the prevalence of vaping, and I'm certainly interested in doing that and being mindful of our resources and what we, fix the things we can change and let go of those we cannot. So, all right. There's a saying about that, yes. All right. Any further discussion on this item? All right. On the motion to file without objection, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
And I think that was everybody. Okay. And that motion passes. All right. We have reached public comment. We did have one public comment that was attached to a different ordinance just because I was trying to find a place to attach it, but it's really more meant for general public comment, so, which is from Mr. Organ, who couldn't be with us again in person, so we miss you, Mr. Organ. But he notes that is a comment on thanking council and administration for working with us to make cities safer for cyclists and pedestrians. In the same vein, I would like to highlight that we were talking about spending $2.2 million to repair streets and a bit later, $500,000 to repair paths and other facilities within parks. It just makes financial sense to build bike and pedestrian infrastructure. So that is Mr. Organ's public comment. We don't have anyone signed in, I'm presuming. So I don't think so. All right, so no public comment. Do we have announcements from council colleagues? Vice President Baker.
Yeah, Loving Lakewood is coming up in December, or in February, so get your tickets for that on Lakewood Alive's website. And secondly, I took out my trash bins last night, and it was so cold in that act of going back and forth to my backyard. And I think about Public Works and fire and police that are out every day in this weather. I just wanted to thank your folks, so you pass it along. Really appreciate what you guys do. My trash was picked up this morning on time. They were beeping up at 7 o'clock in the morning, so they were doing their jobs. And I really appreciate it. It's super cold out there. It's dangerous, so I appreciate that.
Thank you. Actually, that was on my radar too, and as well to thank Human Services working at the Warming Center, Cove. Councilman Strubig.
Thank you, President Keppel. As long as we're giving out thank yous, I'd like to recognize Barb, our one audience member from the League of Women Voters, taking careful notes, and thank you for sharing them with the League of Women Voters.
All right, other announcements from council colleagues? Announcements from the administration? Nope. All right. All right, well, no further business coming before council. Without objection, we're adjourned.